Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Faith Unraveled. I'm Alicia and this is Jamie, and we're excited to talk to you guys about what happens when you are an inactive member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is technically what you all are if you haven't removed your names from the records of the church. Was that a plug?
I guess so.
Maybe that was the nudge you need. What happens when you move to another area and suddenly you have someone from your local ward calling you? How do they know you were there? To answer this question, I have brought a very skilled retired ward clerk of 9 years.
Yeah.
What the hell happened? How did your records end up at your new place? You've moved across the country. Maybe you moved to another country, but somehow your local ward has found you. And that, my friend, is the purpose of the church record. This was a specific question that we got from someone on Instagram. How in the hell did my new ward find me? I don't go to church anymore. I don't consider myself Mormon. So why do I have home teachers assigned to me, ministers assigned to me, visiting my house? And how did they get my address? When someone is born in the church and they receive a name and a blessing, which happens weeks or months after a member of the church has a baby, that child's name goes on the records.
Yeah. So for those who are less active or don't attend church, and when your parents or your brothers and sisters say, hey, let's give them a name and blessing, what it does is it then puts them on the records of the church to where they can be tracked from here on out. So you have to be very cautious about that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of less active members who are like, let's give the baby a blessing. It's kind of like, look how many Catholics will baptize their baby, even though they don't really believe in Catholicism, but it's kind of a tradition. But in Mormonism, this really has impacts. So if you're Catholic, you can go to, you can go to St. Mary's one week and then another Catholic church another week, and nobody's keeping track of you. But in Mormonism, you can only attend and participate as an active member of the church within the ward that you're assigned to, which means you live in that ward. And the bishopric has a record of every single person in their boundary on record. And that will include people who have even had a name and a blessing. Is that right?
And it's part of their duty. Part of their duty is to make sure they are aware of all the members and properly ministering to them. And so they'll do whatever it takes to get their information so they can properly minister to them. It doesn't matter if they haven't gone to church for 20 years or they were just blessed when they were babies. We were still asked to go and visit and check to see how they're doing.
And when I put my member of the church hat on, I remember what it was like to think about the less active, like young women in my ward. The way that I thought about it is that they may not understand the implications of being a member of the church and not going anymore. So let's say they had been baptized, but they're just not attending church. I considered it my duty as a member of the church to help strengthen the saints, build the kingdom. I think from that mindset, boundaries tend to go out the window.
Yeah, they see it as they're trying to make sure you get salvation, right? They're looking at what they'll call the eternal perspective and making sure that you can get to the celestial kingdom. And so they have no problem, like I'll say, bothering a person who's on the records. Even they'll have do not contacts, and where you say do not contact, they will mark it in there that we shouldn't send ministers over or do not contact. But there's times where it'll still say do not contact. And in like ward council or bishopric, they'll say, well, we'll give them another chance. Let's go back over to see. They might have changed their mind. So
it becomes a really difficult situation when you've asked people not to show up and they continue to come. It also makes it a complex dynamic when you realize that it was your parents that gave your address. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Like, as someone who served as a ward clerk, how does that information get from where you just moved to your new area?
There's many different ways. There's seriously many different ways. So when I was in the MTC, I had a full list of people that I was making phone calls with to see where they were at. So they were lost people that no one knew where they were at. And I was calling like mothers, brothers, and sisters to get their information so that we could take them from the lost record over here and put them in a certain ward so they can.
So what does that phone call sound like?
I don't remember. It was.
Do you say like, I'm a missionary for the church?
We're trying to figure out where that we need to send this record to. It's not. We don't have a place for them. Can you provide?
Because if the ward that you were in can no longer contact you, and maybe the missionaries come into ward council one day and say, "Hey, I knocked on the Smith store the other day, and someone else lived there, and they said they don't live there anymore." And so, what will that bishop then do with that Smith's records?
Yeah. So they'll send it to a lost record
which would basically
place,
call Salt Lake.
Salt Lake. And then that's where the missionaries get involved. And some, at least back when I was there, I don't know what it's like. This is 30 years ago. So things could have changed since then. We would call on those records that were lost to see if we can get them back into a ward.
And for the family members that they're contacting, they'll go parents, they'll go siblings. And I remember conversations like this happening in our family where like I'd get a call and say, hey, just to let you know, they're looking for so-and-so. He doesn't want his address given out. So,
Did you ever give an address out?
I don't remember if I did, but I know I've gotten that call because I have less active siblings.
I know she did.
Like that. And that's the other thing. The church changed its verbiage for inactives. Like when we got married, he's like, you don't call them inactives. They're less active.
Yeah. That eventually
there is a hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember thinking though, okay, I know they don't want me to give their address, but it's their eternal salvation. What if there's a chance that there's a home teacher that's going to go surfing with my brother and they're going to make really good friends? And then it did cross my mind, but I remember as family members that we were like, okay, he really doesn't want his information out there, but it could have been a distant relative.
Yeah.
And so recently, do I share this part?
I think it's up to you.
Our extended family was putting together a directory and I let my siblings know you might want to just leave your phone number unless you're going to remove your name from the records of the church.
Yeah. When I was the ward clerk, and prior to sending it to that lost ward or wherever the records get sent to Salt Lake, the bishop would ask us to do whatever it takes to get the information. And so the first thing that we would do is there any like known relative within the stake that we can phone call and figure out where they're at? So that would be the first step that we would take. The second step that we would take, if we couldn't call a known relative, or we didn't have any records that would point us to some other relative outside of the stake that we could call.
Maybe in a neighboring stake or something.
Yeah. We would then take the next step of sending a return address. So we would put like a Relief Society thing or a Elders Quorum activity thing, put it into an envelope, send it off to them, and then ask for return to address. And if they weren't there, we'd get this little thing back and it would share what their address is. And then we'd forward their record onto that address. So that's another way that they figure out. That is
so sneaky.
Yeah.
Because when people move, you can go to the post office and have your mail forwarded to a certain address. That's what you're telling me?
Yeah. That's how that's another methodology that would use. So the MTC making phone calls, right? Then we in the ward would call relatives, or we would do a return to address. And at some point in time, we wouldn't be able to figure out where they're at. That's when we would then send it off to Salt Lake City. So I think the key here is if you do not want to be contacted by the church, you need to remove your name. That's
ding, ding,
if you
ding,
don't if you don't remove your name. Let's say you do move to some other place, and then Salt Lake then starts calling around because they know who you're connected to. They have all that information. They know who your mom and dad is. They know who your brothers and sisters. They
know where you were born and where you're going to die.
They have that entire lineage.
Actually true.
With them. They can make those types of phone calls to get to your information. And all it takes is like your mom, who's very dedicated to the church.
And worried about you.
And worried about you, saying, oh, I need to hit their records off. Like, because Salt Lake will call, right? And they don't want to be a bad person. And so they'll give them the information.
There's salvation that's at hand.
And so I believe if you do not want to be bothered by the church, then what's the best thing to do is get your name removed. Maybe you should explain what it takes to get your name removed.
That was for our next episode. Should we just do it right now?
Yeah, why don't we do it right now?
Okay, what I did to get my name removed from the records of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I went on quitmormon.org. And it was super easy. As far as I understand, it's an attorney or maybe a group of attorneys who do this as a pro bono work to help people remove their name from the records. There is a little bit of a cost, but not from them. You do have to get a letter notarized. So you will have to go to a local like postal annex. The day that it happened to me, I did not see it coming. I hadn't been to church in a couple of years, but our word was getting divided and we were getting put into a new stake. And as someone who's been in this stake for like 27 years, I was like really curious about the new stake president and like what was going to be our new ward. And so I did the Zoom link and I watched it. And in our last episode, we talked about what is it like to go back to church after you've deconstructed. It's kind of like going back into the cave on the Plato's cave allegory. But this was like to the max. So the things that stood out to me inside the cave that were just utterly bizarre is the fact that this whole reorganization happened by decisions between men. And aside from like a couple wives that were up there as like an afterthought on the
And I
stand
don't
and the
think
organist, everybody's just men. And you could hear the ruffling of their suits as they patted each other and said, "Thank you so much, brother. Couldn't have done it without your brother." It was just all, and I was like, holy crap, this whole organization is just men. I love men. Some of the most important people in my life are men, but they would never act like that. Like, you don't have a voice in this organization. Can you imagine? It's so wild for these men. They're up out there on the stand. I know a lot of them, and a lot of them are really good men, and they don't conduct their home life this way. Their wives are at the table with them, making decisions with them. I know this because we've been close to a lot of these
yeah.
families. They're amazing men. Why do they allow a church organization to have all these meetings where there's no women's voices allowed? And that was what struck me as just insanity. I logged out and I opened my laptop.
Filled out the quiz.
I went on quitmormon.org, and within 60 minutes, I had the thing printed. I had driven to the postal annex, which was open.
That afternoon we went.
Yeah, he went with me. I was like,
Yeah.
I think I need you to go with me. I'm feeling really emotional about this whole thing. Like, you have to know when you're taking your name off the records, there's going to be a mix of emotions. It's kind of like for people who get divorced and they are devastated, but they know it's what's best. That's the complexity that exists there. I mean, divorce even more so, I would say. But like, it's a big decision. It feels like a lot. You in your brain, you're like, I'm signing away my salvation. Like, I'm writing off every covenant, every promise that's ever been made to me. Like, what is going to happen to me after I do this? So I go down to the notary, and oddly enough, I'm still in the mode of like praying. So I'm like, I don't know who I'm praying to. Something out in the universe, like, just give me comfort through this thing, you know? And so I go to the notary office, and like I said, within 1 hour, I was back home submitting a notarized copy to quitmormon.org. And I believe that it was September 22nd that I got my confirmation letter. So it was like 5 to 6 weeks later.
But it took a while before
I fell off the rolls.
Yeah, you fell off the rolls.
Yeah.
Like, you got a confirmation letter, but you didn't lose your login for probably another month.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I kept trying to log into my LDS
End of
tools to see if it
October,
would still work.
November.
A couple questions that I've gotten. One of the things that I was really worried about, and I have gotten this as a question, I didn't want to lose access to Family Search because I love family history, and connecting with my ancestors through stories has been a huge beneficial part of my deconstruction process, especially with all of my Mormon ancestors, reading their stories through a new lens. Family Search is such a great tool, and it's free if you're a member of the church. The reality is, I still have access to familysearch.org. So that's great. My login still works. I just don't see the ordinances, but I still have access to the memories. I still have access to the files and pictures and stories and dates. I just don't have the temple work side of it. I did lose my membership to ancestry.com. So members of the church have a free Ancestry membership. It's just like some kind of deal the church cut with Ancestry. So I don't have that anymore, but I do have Family Search. And I feel more connected to beauty, truth. I've had beautiful experiences in my life since taking my name off the records. Like, I feel confident in saying you're not cutting yourself off to, quote, blessings. There are many beautiful parts of life that occur as I still have those like little psychic connections with my daughter at 3 a.m. when I just can't sleep and I find out something was going on with her. I would have called that the spirit before. But now I'm like, oh, that's just like biology or quantum something that we haven't discovered yet. Like, who knows what it is? But all those things within that umbrella of spirituality, I still experience it even after negating the baptismal covenant.
But by taking your name off the record now, she's not going to be contacted. They have no idea like where she's at, who she's at. Matter of fact, when I look on the rolls now, it's just me and the kids. And that's it. And I haven't taken my name off because if you bother me, I'm going to bother you back. That's my situation.
It was like, here's how I set a boundary.
Yeah. So like,
I'll share my testimony.
We've had missionaries like send me texts, and I've said, hey, here's where I'm at. Like, here's the CS letter. If you want to come over, you're going to hear like where I'm coming from. Yeah. And normally they check out. They say, oh, thank you, Brother Exxon. We'll write that in our book or something like that.
I miss having the missionaries in my home. I wish I could have them come in and feel good about sharing this information with them, but I feel like it's too destabilizing. But if they really wanted to push it, I'd be happy to have a conversation with them because I love the missionaries.
They stopped by like 3 or 4 months ago, and I warned them. I'm like, hey, here's the
We're probably not the
situation. Yeah,
best.
if you come in, you're not going to like it. Like if you need a drink, feel free to stop by. I'll get a drink. I know how hard it is to track and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but know that if you even share anything about certain things, I will come back pretty hard.
I tried to pick up some sister missionaries in a really bad part of town that I was driving through the other day. But when I made the U-turn, they were at a place that I couldn't get to. And I love the missionaries. A lot of return missionaries that have been in our home for like holidays, because we've had missionaries here on Christmas, on New Year's, on Easter.
Yeah.
A lot of them have gone home and deconstructed and then found our podcast and reached out because they're deconstructing now too. So I still love having those relationships. Even if they stay in the church, I still love their relationships.
Yeah.
But figuring out how to set those boundaries if you are going to stay in the church is
just know
really beneficial.
Just know that you're going to get contacted.
Yeah.
Like if you're not pulling your name off the records, you will be contacted. And there's many ways that they can get back in connection with you. The only thing I think where you could be totally lost is if you're a convert to the church and there was no relatives around you and you don't have any connection back to the church, then you might be lost completely from the church. But if you have any relatives that know who you are, where you're at, they'll go down the line and try to figure out where you're at and get you back in the church. So if you do not want to be bothered, like the other way, being a word clerk, I'll tell you the other way where you don't have to go through quitmormon.org. You can write a letter to the bishop and say, I want my name removed, and give it to him directly. And he's supposed to remove your name. What I've seen with some bishops is they are so worried about your salvation that they might not remove your name. Like you almost have to get pretty direct to them and say, like, I do not want to be on the records anymore. You need to pull me off, and kind of threaten it a bit to get it off.
It depends on the bishop, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, and for me, if I went and took a letter, I think, to our bishop, they would pull me off right away.
Right. But a lot of bishops, don't they feel like this member doesn't understand what they're doing?
Yeah.
They're
going to lose their baptismal covenants.
Yeah. They're releasing the gift of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah.
So to them, it's like.
They do it out of good intentions.
Yeah.
Right? It's
absolutely.
all out of good intentions. It's not try to harm you or anything. They try, they think from their perspective that you are taking a step that will get you into the celestial kingdom, and they do not want to do that. They want to do everything in their possible to keep you.
We're going to be there in the celestial kingdom with you.
We're going to go TK smoothies, bumping uglies in there. But yeah, so if you don't know what TK smoothies, look it up.
Another episode. I'm sure everybody here knows what a TK smoothie is, right? Yeah. You don't get genitals unless you're in the celestial kingdom.
You get Barbies.
So we're going to have all cute and smooth like a Barbie.
Yeah.
Okay, one other person did send me a message and said, hey, just to let you know, when my ministers came over, that's what they call a home teacher now. If you haven't been to church in a while, it's called a ministering assignment instead of a home teaching assignment. But her home teachers came over basically. And she said, look, I don't want to be contacted. And they said, do you want your name removed from the records? And she was like, yeah. Apparently, they gave her something to sign. And then within a few weeks, she was notified that the church removed her. So it depends on who your bishop is. I've also heard one of our friends told us that their bishop would take the letter and say, sure, no problem, and put it in his top drawer.
Yeah.
And would never send it to Salt Lake. And that he's doing that because he doesn't want to ruin salvation for you.
Yeah, it's all dependent on the bishop. I've been times where they're like, well, we need to clean up our records. We need to get people off the rolls that no longer want to be on the rolls. I had a bishop like that, and they were like, go out there and start working it. And all they had to do is write a letter to me, and I'll pull them off. That is very admirable when they do that.
Yeah. Well, in the eyes of a member, that could be viewed as like heartless.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Well, I thought it was. I'll be honest. When I was there, I was like, you don't want to pull their names off. They're gonna lose all their baptismal covenants, their temple covenants, you know. And so you have to like kind of put yourself in their situation and what they're thinking, because they're still thinking like your best interest is not what you think. It's what we think. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I liked this episode.
I'm glad you liked it.
If you liked it too, please let us know in the comments. We love to hear your feedback. And if you're listening on podcast, please write us a review. We love connecting here with you guys. Also, let us know what you think of our new format.
Yeah.
Chair, standing, one camera. What do you think?
We'll be going back and forth between these two formats. So
yeah. And we got more episodes to come. So if you want to recommend an episode, make sure to go to our Instagram, which is Faith Unraveled, and send me a DM with an episode idea. I've screenshotted like 4 this week of really great episode ideas. So can't wait to dive into those, and we'll see you next week, guys. Bye.